Hi guys, welcome to day 15 of the 20 days of Power BI challenge with Zakrak Learning. I trust your learning has been interesting so far. Yesterday we introduced the concept of DAX, data analysis expression, what it is, why it is important to you as a data analyst. Today we'll continue from there by learning about some important concepts in DAX. We'll also write some DAX formulas to better generate insights from our data. So today we'll be talking about calculated columns, measures, and differences between calculated columns and measures. Then we'll roll over to our Power BI desktop to create some of these calculated columns, examples of calculated columns and measures. Now, what is a calculated column? In Excel, for instance, when you want to extend a particular table, you just rush into a cell, right, or the first row of the table and type in your formula. You can even do selections inside the formula and Excel will return values in that or populate the columns, the rows in that column. In DAX, however, what you use is a calculated column. Okay, so a calculated column is just like any other column in a table. You can use it for rows, column, filters. You can even use it to create relationship in your data model. So think of it as extending your table. Only this time around, DAX doesn't do row-wise or row-wise selection. It doesn't allow you to select a subset of your table in your calculations. What DAX allows you to do, what DAX does for you, what calculated columns do for you is that it uses all the values in a row, in a column for its calculation. So the context, as we'll get to know shortly, is row-wise context. In other words, the DAX language executes your formula by going to each row of your table and executing the formula based on the row values in the rows. Okay, so the DAX expression defined for a calculated column operates in the context of the row of the table to which it belongs. So in other words, if you have a table, right, and you execute a DAX formula, the entire table, right, will have new rows, all right, value for each row of that table in the new column. So calculated columns have row-wise context. All right. Another thing about calculated columns is that it is not affected by filters or slicers that are applied in your reports. Not affected. All right. Why? Because of the context. Every row in that particular table, right, is executed individually, all right, and the output is in column. Awesome. So we'll see how to create calculated columns. We saw an example yesterday with the discount status column, but we're going to look at more examples today. Another thing we'll talk about is the measures in Power BI. Measures in Power BI. So what are measures? All right. Unlike calculated columns where you have row-wise context, measures are a bit different. All right. So whenever you want to perform aggregates, you want to summarize your data, you want to find out single values that describe your data, measures are there for you. Measures is what you should use. So whenever you do not want to compute values for each row, all right, but what you just want is aggregate values from many rows of your table, what you need is measure. So that is why measures work perfectly well with aggregate functions like sum, averages, maximum, minimum, standard deviation, basically functions that return single values. Now, a calculated column needs to be defined in a table, right? And it cannot be referenced from another table unless there's a relationship between the two tables. That's one. Two, you cannot move a calculated column from one table to another. That's not possible. However, for a measure needs to be defined in a particular table. Fine, yes, just like calculated column. But the measure doesn't really need to belong to the table. That means the measure can reference other columns in another table for its calculation, right, in its formula, but it doesn't need to belong to those tables. As a matter of fact, you can move measures from one table to another in your model, as we will see very soon. Now, measures are affected by filters and slicers applied in your reports. Okay, they offer flexible analysis. Unlike calculated columns, your measures are affected by filters and slicers. What do you mean by this? When you create a measure, that value you get, let's say you calculated the average of profits, right? That value you get can be affected by filters when you begin to do your analysis. So let's say you want only profit for the month of March, right? When you apply that filter to your visual or to your analysis, the measure becomes, or the value of that measure becomes the value for what? Only the month of March. So it is very dynamic, it is flexible. It is how filters are applied in the background, right? Before you even create measures, the way filters are applied in the background, where you see a breakdown of your profit by month, right? So imagine creating a value, right? A summary of that profit value and using it instead of allowing Power BI to perform that calculation for you. Okay, so we'll be taking a look at measures. We'll create some measures in today's lesson. Now, another thing about measures is that as much as they don't need to belong to a particular table, and they are not affected by slicers in your report, it is important to know when to choose measures over calculated columns or calculated columns over measures. So let's look at them side by side. Now, so first, measures and calculated columns both use DAX expressions. Okay, The difference is just the context of evaluation. For calculated columns, you have a row-wise context. For measures, it is called a cell, okay, cell-wise context. Okay, so a measure is evaluated in the context of the cell of the pivot table or DAX query. So the context means the selection, all right, of the cell, whereas a calculated column is computed at the what? At the row level of the table to which it belongs. What does that mean? Again, very important for you to understand this concept, right? For a calculated column, all the values are calculated, all the values are generated for each row of your table. For each row, and once you reference a particular row, you don't have access to other rows in that values in other rows in that column. So it is a row-wise context. If you say profit times quantity, for instance, right, or unit cost times quantity, for instance, DAX goes into that table and picks every instance of or every row of unit cost and quantity, multiplies them, returns a value. That is what we mean by row-wise context. For a measure, measure aggregates, so it picks the entire value under consideration, under the selection, in the current selection. That is why the context is the cell, all right, the cell, right? So it picks it, aggregates it, returns a single value. If the selection changes, the value will change. So that is why it is affected by slicers. Another thing about calculated column is that you should use it only when you want to see output across every row in your table. Okay, so take note of that. Another one is you should use measure only when you need a value that changes based on the filters you have applied. Okay, so when you need a single value that can change dynamically based on the filters you have applied, use a measure. Now, a calculated column is actually what we'll start with. We'll take a look at calculated columns before moving to some measures. All right. So let's head over to our Power BI desktop interface and get our hands dirty. All right. So here we are in our Power BI desktop interface, and you might notice that there are some changes in my interface. All right, I just or recently downloaded the latest version of Power BI desktop, that is the December release, and there has been some interesting updates to the interface. So first off, you can now have a quick view, a detailed view of all your visuals in the home tab. Okay, you can also minimize and access your tabs. You can access your tabs, that is your pins, okay, on this sidebar here. Okay, so your data pane, your build visual pane, and the format pane, as you can see. So side by side, the format pane and the build visual pane are no longer on the same panel, as you can see. So you can format and build your visual. The build visual pane also, there are some interesting new features. All right, so you can also toggle between suggesting a type as you select your visuals. All right, so maybe we'll do a more detailed review of these new features in another video. Okay, so but let's just get right to it. So on the for calculated columns and measures, right? At the top here, you see several buttons for creating your measures. So you can create a measure from from scratch by writing your formula, or you can use the quick measure button. You can also right click on a table name that's in your data panel, and you see new column, new measure, new quick measure. Okay, so the end goal of both measures and your calculated columns is to actually derive more insights from your data, more detailed insights from your data. So everything that leads to that is basically welcome. Okay, so let's create some measures. So let's create some measures from um, the facts table. So if I click on new quick measure, you see what happens. There's PowerBI suggests, see, some measures that I can quickly apply to my data. See, aggregate by category, maximum, minimum, weighted average by category, filters. You can apply filter value, different from filter value, percentage difference, sales from new customers. You can apply time intelligence function, which we'll look at either tomorrow or next tomorrow. Okay, so this requires a date table, which we'll create in that session. Okay, totals, running total. So basically you can create measures quickly by clicking on any of these. All right, so let's say we want to find out what is our average per category. Okay, so what is our base value? So here we'll supply the numeric value. All right, what average are you calculating? So let's say we want to just find out what is the average quantity per category. So I'll just drag this and drop it here. That is the base value is what? Quantity. So I'll right click, and so this is average. Then the category, let's say by product category. So the product category, I'll drag this and drop it here. Okay, so the base value is your numeric value, the value you want to average. Okay, so all right, so by category. So once I click add, the DAX formula will be written or generated for me, and the measure will be added to my table. Awesome. So take a look at this. It has now been added to my table. If I click on it, the average quantity by category has been added to my fact sales table. How do I know that this is a measure? Because of this icon beside it. This icon beside it shows you that this is a calculated value. This is a measure. Now, in our formula bar, you can see the formula that generated this measure with the average X, okay, and the functions that were evaluated to calculate the measures. Okay, very good. You can edit it and adjust it as you like. All right, so let's see how we can create our own measures from scratch. Okay, from the scratch. So I want us to be able to also visualize these measures. Okay, so um I'll just add a okay, I'll add this build visual pane here. Awesome. So what I want is I want to visualize this. Okay, so as soon as I drop it here, Power BI suggests a data type that I can use to what for my calculation. Can you see that? Can you see that? So let's say I want a card visual instead. I can simply click on it and I'll have a card visual. Okay, so you can also turn on the suggest a type option there. Can you see that? And there's this on object interaction. Can you see that, where you can edit and format your chart without going to the format pane. Awesome. So the average quantity per category is 4. Average quantity per category is 4. Now, this is a measure, but if we would like to visualize that on our own, right? Let's use a table for that. Just drag this up here. Let's use a table for that. So let's say we check the quantity and we add okay, let me just the product category. I'll just check product category and quantity. Okay, and I change the summary of this to average. Good. So can you see that? Can you see that the total average is 3.79? So this has been rounded up for us. Okay, if we format this, the call out value, if we just format it, that's the decimal places. If we format it to 2, if we format it to 2 decimal places, okay, very good. So if we format it to 2 decimal places, you can see very quickly now that it reflects almost the same value. So this is a difference between a measure and a calculated column. That measure has given us a single value that we can work with, that can also be filtered based on this context. So this is average of quantity, right? Now if we come back to this table and we add the measure we've created and we add it to this table, for instance, expand that. So and then for this, okay, let's go ahead and format this. We'll just increase the display, we'll increase the number of decimal places. All right, so you see that the values for the measures have been filtered according to the category of the product category. Okay, the values have now been filtered based on the product category. So there are two things at play here. Here we have Power BI performing that filtering, the measure for us. Okay, based on the relationship between the category table and the sales table. Okay, while here we already have the measure, right? It is only being filtered through the category table or the category column. Okay, so let's create some other measures. Let's see some other measures, okay, and calculated columns that we can create from this data set to help us gain more insights into the data set. So I'll go to my table view, and I'd like to start with a few calculated columns that can help us gain more insight into our data. Now, if you look at the sales and profit columns, right, we can calculate the profit margin. Okay, we can calculate the profit margin for each sale, each order. Okay, so that will require us to create a calculated column. So let's do that. To do that, under table tools, click on the new column icon there. New column icon. Okay, so as soon as you click on it, the formula bar will be activated, and then you can type in your formulas. You can type in our formula. Awesome. So the first thing we want to do is to give our column a name. So we'll call it profit margin. Okay, followed by the equal sign. All right, you can expand or collapse the formula bar. You can also zoom in or zoom out of the formula bar. Then using your trackpad, all you need to do is just use your both fingers to swipe away from the trackpad, or you can use the control and plus on your keyboard. So here's our profit margin. Our profit margin is going to be the profit. So as soon as I begin to type, you see PowerBI suggests, okay, uses intelligence to suggest columns that correspond to what I'm typing. All right. So sales by profits divided by sales is what? Our profit margin. Okay, so sales, fact sales. So profit divided by sales. That's all. So I'll hit enter for that to run. Awesome. So we now have our profit margin. We can format that. So here we want to format it as percentage. Great. So as you can see now, we now have profit margin for each sale. Okay, each sale, the profit margin for each sale. Good. So this will be useful later. Another column would like to create. Okay, when you go to your profit column, all right, and check the filter, you will notice that some values are formatted or some values are negative. Okay, so that tells us that not all products or all sales were profitable. Not all the sales were profitable. Some of these sales were at a loss, and some might have even been no profit or loss at all. It was at break even. It was sold at break even. All right. So what we want to do now is we want to assign a label. So we want to give labels to these values. All right. We want to give labels to this value, and that will require logical function. It will require a logical function. So for that, we can use the if or the switch function. Now, in our other class, we used the if function to create the discount status calculated column, all right, where we the arguments are expressions, okay, and then the result if true and result if false. This time around, we're going to use switch so that you see how switch works. Switch is a more readable way of writing your logical statement. All right, so you can use it for labeling, just as we're about to do. You can use it to specify conditions and values if true. Okay, so I'll click again on the new column. So what are the possible values that or labels that the profit column can have? Is either you have sold at a profit, a loss, or no profit, no loss at all. Okay, so let's call this the profit or loss. So let's call it um I'll just call that profit or loss. I'll just call that profit or loss. Okay, so equals switch. Okay, so as you can see, these are the arguments, like I explained the other day, the expression, the value, the result, if true, like that. And so the ellipsis tells you that you can have two or more, in fact, several number or pairs of values and results. And then finally, the value if all other conditions return false. That is the else. Okay, that's where the else come in. Now, the square bracket around else shows you that it is optional. You don't have to put it. It is optional. If you don't have any alternative value, you can leave it out of your. So let's write the function. So the first thing is to type your true. Okay, so that is the expression here. True. Okay, so what we are testing for is true. Okay, and next, profit, that is if profit. Okay, the condition. So if profit is, so if the profit is positive, that is if profit is greater than 0, okay, what value do we want to return? What is the result of that? Okay, so we want to say profit. So there was a profit. So we want to say there was profit. Okay, comma. If the value is less than 0, so if profit is lesser than 0, okay, if profit is lesser than 0, what do we have? All right, so that will be at a loss. Okay, that means the product was sold at a loss. The product was sold at a loss. Otherwise, okay, if there's no profit or loss, that means what we have is what? Break even. Okay, I don't know if I've spelled that correctly. Okay, all right. So I'll close that bracket. Okay, so let's arrange our formulas correctly. Oh, I've made a mistake there. Okay, so I would have loved to arrange it in a more readable format. So, but however, as you can see, our calculated column has been created for us. We now have profit for um, values that are positive. In the profit column, we have profit, and then values that are negative, right? In the profit column are losses, and then values that are neither positive nor negative that are equal to zero are now break even. No, I never ever expected that there will be break even values here, right? We just added that as a guide, right, to our formula just in case. But however, you can see that about 65 products, all right, or 65 sales were at a loss. Can you see that? At about 65 of them were at break even, sorry, at break even, were sold at break even value. Okay, and you can also quickly see that some of them, the highest amount of discount applied to those products was 30%, at 30%. Some were at 20, okay, and some at no discount at all. So that means these products were sold at exactly how much it costs, all right, at the cost price. So let's arrange, so to use the enter key, right, in your formula bar, you hold shift and enter. If you just click enter, it will immediately run your code to execute your code for you. Okay, it will execute your code for you. So let's format this properly. So there's also the DAX query view, right, that we can use to format our code correctly. DAX query view. So awesome. So we now have our formula nicely written. Good. So now let's look at some measures that we can create from this data. Let's create some measures. Now, some of these measures will be aggregate, just metrics from our data. Okay, total days, average days, maximum. So let's just see how to apply them in creating measures. Okay, so to create a measure, go to table tools. All right, so on the table tools tab, you see new measure there. Okay, so let's create some measures. Okay, so new measure. Awesome. So the first measure we would like to create is the total sales amount. Okay, so just type that total sales amount. Total sales amount, and that will be the sum of the sales column. Okay, so this is sum of sales column. So we've created the total sales amount. All right, so you can see we've created our total sales amount. The next thing we would like to find out is the total number of customers, right? Superstore customers. Okay, so one way is to do the count rows. All right, we can use the count rows function. All right, it counts the total number of rows in a table in the customer table. Or we could use the count distinct or distinct count of customer IDs in the facts sales table. Another way to do that is, since we have unique keys in the customer ID, unique value in the customer ID key, is to just count the number of what? Values in the customer ID column. So that's three ways in which you can perform your count in using DAX formula. Okay, so let's create a new measure. Okay, so I'll call this number of customers or total customers. So let's just call that total customers. Okay, so we'll do a count, a normal count. So count of, so there are different types of counts as suggested by your DAX IntelliSense, right? So you see count A, count AX, count blank, count rows, all right? So count rows is a table function, all right? DAX function. So it counts all the rows in a table. Count blank counts all the blank rows in your table. Now, the count function, right, usually counts the non-blank, okay? That is, it counts the non-blank rows in your table, okay? Non-blank rows in a column, rather, okay? While count A, we count everything, okay? So if I click on count A, all right, so it counts everything, number of values in a column. And if I click on count, so it only counts the numbers in a column. So you have to be careful. If you're counting for the customer ID, okay, what kind of data type is customer ID? What data type is customer ID? All right. So if the customer ID is not a numeric, okay, count will not be able to what? Detect the values in those rows, because count counts only the number, only detects numbers in a column. Okay, so the best formula to use now, right, is to use the count A. Okay, is to use the what? The count A. Counts the number of values in a column. So we complete that, and it will be what? Dim what? Customer ID. Right? So we'll select the customer ID, close brackets, and hit enter. So awesome. So as you can see, we now have our what? Total customers. Okay. Another measure we would like to calculate, all right, we want to find out the total or the average profit margin. Okay, the average profit margin, or let's leave that for now. Okay, let's find out the total amount or the maximum profit. Okay, the maximum profit or sale amount. So here we use what? The maximum function, the max function. You have the max function, the minimum function. Okay, so we use the max function for this maximum profit amount. Okay, so that will be the what? Max profit. That's max. Okay, so returns the largest numeric value or largest string. Okay, so it doesn't matter the data type. The DAX formula will adjust to the data type in that column, the data type of that column. Okay, so it will ignore logical values. All right, it will ignore logical values or missing values in your data, but it will not ignore zero. It will not ignore zero. So maximum sale amount, so that is sales. Okay, so maximum sales amount, enter to run. So you can create as many measures as you desire, okay, as required of you by what? Using DAX formula. By using DAX formulas. Now, supposing you want to apply a filter to a particular measure. You want to create a measure, but you would like to only focus the values of that measure or the result of that measure on a particular section of your data. Say, for instance, I want to find out how much sales, all right? How much was the sales amount in the West, for instance, that is the West region. So if you go to dim location, you see this is we have different regions. So in the West region, how much was sales in the West region? Okay, so I can do that, all right, by the only way I can do that is to apply a filter to the sales amount, to the total sales amount. That is sum of sales amount. I can apply a filter to it. Okay, so but you can do that while writing the formula for your measure, all right, by using the calculate function. Okay, so calculate function allows you to create or evaluate an expression, all right, while applying filters at the same time. Okay, while applying filters at the same time. So let's take a look at how that works. Okay, so we'll create a new measure. Good. So we'll create a new measure called West region or West sale amount. Good. So West sales amount, and that will be equal to, we'll use the calculate function. Calculate function, right? So as you can see, evaluate an expression in a context modified by filters. Now, this filter you're going to apply in this formula will not be affected by filters you apply in your report or in any other part of your report. Okay, whether on a page, on a visual, across your report, this filter will override any other filter in your report. Okay, so that's what you should take note of. So let's do that. So where sales amount. So to calculate that, we need the sum of sales. Okay, so I'll close that bracket, followed by the filter. What is that filter we want to apply? Okay, we want to apply the filter, or the column we want to filter by is in the location table. So we'll type in there the region. I'll type the region. Okay, so where the region is equal to the West, is equal to West. So where the region equals West. Okay, so this is just a simple way of writing a calculate formula. You can add more filters, all right? You can add more filters, several other filters as you desire. Okay, so let's say we want west, and the customer category or the customer segment is consumer, for instance, right? We can add that here, and DAX will, or the function will filter based on those criteria and return the sale amount. So let's just keep this simple for now. So we hit enter and the function has been created. Now, if you're going to have more than one function in your filter, like in a filter condition, all right, what you need, all right, you won't be able to run it directly. Okay, you will not be able to run it directly. You will rather need a function called filter. You need a function called what? Filter. So filter is a function that performs what? Filtering. Okay, that is dedicated to what? Filtering your data in DAX. All right. So we've created some measures. We've created some calculated columns. Okay, we'll take a look at them. All right, in the one after the other. We'll take a look at them one after the other. Okay, but our video is getting too long. I would like us to draw the curtain here for today. All right, tomorrow I'll show you how to group or create a table for your measures. I'll show you how to create a measures table, all right, and then see how we can use some of these measures in building our report. Measures and even the calculated column in building our reports. There are a lot of interesting insights that we can gather by creating calculated columns and measures thanks to DAX.
See you in the next tutorial. Until then, don't forget to like this video, hit the subscribe button, click the notification bell to get updates on new videos, and share this video with your friends. Bye for now.